Good afternoon, good evening, whatever your time zone, wherever you are. Welcome. As always, we'd love to know where people are, who you are, where you're joining us from. Um, to add a little, I see some familiar faces, some familiar names. Um, a few people who I know have been on vacation and are back. This is exciting. But we'd love to hear from you and share who you are and what where you're joining us from. But I suppose I should start with myself in that case. How's everyone doing? I am Megan Mitchell. I am currently the acting director for strategy and operations for the Jameel World Education Lab. And many of you are familiar with JWell, but actually this is an event that we opened to the public. It opened more broadly beyond just our members. So let me just ground us there. The Jameel World Education Lab at MIT is a center designed to, in our mission is education designed for everyone to thrive. And every educators everywhere, as I think everyone on this call knows and feels, are being asked to do more, to reach more students, to upgrade their learning, to fuel the economy and serve the community in new and unique ways, and integrating technology and considering technology, I'm sure is particularly relevant to those who chose to join this call. So we work to meet this imperative by working with educational innovators around the world, and together we look to disrupt the status quo in education by creating practical, actionable, new ideas that can transform learning at scale. We do this through ambitious projects. We couldn't do this without our member organizations, and our staff and faculty. Together, we explore new ideas, share thinking, what's the global context, local context for the type of work we're all doing. And we do this through workshops and campus visits to MIT, sessions like this one, and really hope to bridge the transition, from education to the workforce, in cultivating innovations to better connect learners, to understand what's happening, particularly in the technology space and how that impacts all of us. And so, today you're joining us for our first event in our AI Innovation Series. So welcome to all of you. There are 5 events in this series, and some are public forums like this one. Others are designed as interactive discussions just for our members so that they can reflect on and react to maybe the previous sessions, and share their own experiences and what this means to them, as they reflect on what was said and react, but also think about, what it means for them, and share with one another, because this really isn't meant to be a one-way dialogue. This is meant to be a space to learn together. So, for the members on this call, I just want to call out that next week we'll have a follow-on to this discussion, where Heywan Park, who's a colleague of and a researcher in Cynthia Breazeal's lab, will lead a discussion with our members around reflections and reactions and really sharing. And then for those of you who aren't members or members, our August 22nd event will also be open to the public, and that will be focused on some entrepreneurial ventures and people who are taking this really interesting technology and these innovations and applying them in ways, maybe in a, we'll say a more commercial application. So what's the building blocks from the research and what's being done at places like MIT to the implementation in the field. And so, I think the potential and the promise, and even the perils, whether they're real or imagined, of generative AI, I think have been, I know they've been a core theme of JWell's work this year. And I think even it touches on every conversation we have, every opportunity. And I think for a lot of people in the world, this is new. And this is something that is just everywhere. In fact, I was having dinner with my 9-year-old nephew last night, and he said, "Honey, Meg, generative AI, AI is everywhere. It's exploded." And I thought, well, yes and no, it's been around. We tried to talk about that a little bit, but when you're eating pizza after a Little League baseball game, and the topic is AI. I think it just shows how it's crossed so many dimensions. But I think it's been real for all of us on this call for a long time. And so generative AI has really been a core theme of JWell's work this year. And in fact, in May, about 30 representatives from across our member institutions joined us in Cambridge for a week of shared conversations, collaborations, and workshops. We brought in what we think were very insightful presentations, whether they were from our members or from folks within the MIT community, and even some in-person demonstrations to really deepen the understanding of what's happening in the space, fuel collaboration, and the like. And some of the, key themes that we felt that emerged, and I think the pain points we felt is, governance in AI is taking place in real time. For us, it was in higher ed. I think we're feeling that in every aspect of society, whether that's university governance, that's geopolitical, that is, what our political leaders are doing. And really baseline literacy in AI is needed, for educators across the spectrum. And then I think some core tenets that undergird all of this are trust, governance, transparency, and inclusion, that those are building blocks that organizations and institutions need to think about and consider and address as they embark on these types of, integration and thinking about AI in their space. And so I think those are some things that you'll likely, you'll hear from, and we're excited for today's conversation. So today, as I mentioned, this is our grounding conversation for our AI Innovators series. And so today you will hear from MIT Dean for Digital Learning, Professor Cynthia Breazeal, and she'll give an introduction to how these types of technologies work, how students and teachers might deploy these tools and approaches, and how schools can take advantage of new opportunities and manage the many challenges we know we'll face, but a challenge is an opportunity if you turn it around when promoting student independent learning. So before I turn it over to Professor Breazeal, she is a leader in this space globally and a leader at MIT. She is the director of MIT RAISE, which is Responsible AI for Social Empowerment, is what RAISE stands for, which is a cross-MIT research effort on advancing and democratizing AI education, particularly through K-12 and adult education. It's a collaboration between MIT Open Learning. Open Learning is where JWell sits and lives within the institution, the Media Lab, and the Schwarzman College of Computing. RAISE offers annual K-12 outreach programs, and including a 6-week summer program called MIT Future Makers. They do the Day of AI, which is a great opportunity for thousands of teachers across the world to bring AI literacy into their classrooms. And under her leadership, she's launched these programs to introduce students of all backgrounds, and teachers to the foundational concepts of AI and its role in their lives, right? And so there's where you build in that inclusion that's so important in all of the work that we do and the considerations that we do. Dean Breazeal also heads the Personal Robotics Research Group at the MIT Media Lab, and that's where she's a professor of media arts and sciences. And her research focus includes technical innovation in AI and user experience design, and understanding the psychology of engagement to design personified AI technologies that can promote human flourishing and personal growth. Professor and Dean Breazeal is also the faculty director head that we work cllosely with at the Jameel World Education Lab. So, her work intersects in so many places, and it is so important to all that we do at JWell, but then also the work that is happening across MIT in this transformational space. So now what I'd like to do is actually, before we turn it over to Dean Breazeal, I'm going to actually introduce Bill Von Villian, who is the he has we'll call it the distinguished moniker of to be the head of our thinking series. And I think if you spent any time with his bio, you'd understand why that's a perfect thing, the thinking series for him to be leading for us. He's authored many books and articles on and chapters on science technology and science technology policy and workforce education. And he's been teaching science and policy at MIT since 2007. So he's really been integral in helping us think about what this series would look like. And has worked really, over time to help us and help MIT support their relationships with research and development operations at the government and institutional level there. And he's just a wonderful collaborator and member of our team and our community. So what I'd like to do is he's going to share a little bit of his thoughts and kind of the origins of this series, and then turn it over to Dean Breazeal. So Bill, can I turn it to you?
Sure. Thanks, Megan. And I'll just be very brief because I want to get to Cynthia too. AI offers, as I think we know, a whole new suite of opportunities. So it's the second big revolution that's been coming along in education in the last decade. The first really was the advent of online education at real scale and the technical mechanism to do that. This is the latest. And it offers an opportunity for, and I'll just hit some highlights, a new kind of personalization of education where teachers can really adapt education really to the needs of particular students. Part of that is that it opens an opportunity for digital tutoring. AI can help in grading, at least on simple exams that use answer keys, but over time, potentially more than that. It can offer feedback to students on what they're learning. In other words, it can alert them to things that they're missing and put them into feedback loops to catch up. And it can, reduce time on administrative tasks for teachers and for administrators. Obviously, there's drawbacks to AI. Like all new technologies, it's always a double-edged sword. Some of the issues include reduced human interaction for students, a kind of overdependence on technology, and reduced interaction with real live teachers. And there are obviously data privacy and security issues, and there's ethical issues. Does this open big doors to larger scale cheating, and how do we manage that process? So that's just a quick snapshot on some of the background issues, but let's turn to Cynthia, who is going to really educate us on these kinds of issues. Cynthia.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill and Megan. It's a pleasure to be joining you here. I'm going to be touching on a lot of different topics as it relates to the intersection of AI and education. My goal is to tell you a little bit about the kind of research that's happening in academic settings as AI is advancing, different roles it can play in education. I'm sure a lot of you are very aware of the personalized AI tutors. I'm going to present our particular take on that, which is different than probably you've heard about Conmigo and things like that. A very different age group, very different kind of focus on the kinds of intelligence. I am going to talk about helping people learn about AI. So learning with AI, you could argue that's the AI personalized learning companion work. Learning about AI, so AI literacy, and we at MIT now are actually using a term AI fluency, which is a much deeper engagement with this material that empowers people to create solutions with these kinds of technologies, and how do we empower a much more diverse group of people to do that. And then at the end of the talk, I wanted to share a bunch of resources that we at MIT and RAISE have developed on a broad set of topics that you may find helpful and interesting, from curriculum materials and policy documents and so forth. And hopefully that can maybe inform the discussion you have with Heywan later on. So again, to kind of talk about learning with AI, learning about AI, and then some resources that hopefully you'll find useful to you. A lot of the work that I am going to be presenting is going to be through the lens of K-12, but I can assure you many of the technologies and insights and lessons apply to people of all ages and kind of learning stages. So let me get started. So I first, again, want to talk about my research group to kind of orient you towards the lens upon which we approach this challenge or this opportunity of how do you design interactive AI systems that help people learn. So as Megan mentioned, I am the founder and director in the MIT Media Lab of the Personal Robots group. And as that title suggests, we actually design and develop physical robots. And so what kind of robots? Well, if you think about science fiction like Star Wars and R2D2 and C3PO, that is actually the kind of robot that we try to make. So robots that can deeply interact with people in a very socially and emotionally intelligent, human-centered way, very much kind of like how we have dreamed about them in the movies. And our goal then is to, obviously we're not there yet, so we are trying to responsibly advance the science, the computational methods to endow machines, in this case robots, with these kinds of capabilities that allow them to much deeply understand and engage and collaborate with us. And it's really oriented towards helping people achieve our goals, right? So how through that interaction can these social robots help unlock human potential through education, say better healthcare and so forth, maximize our success? How do we design to address kind of what humans need to be successful so that we are actually more effective with these tools and technologies? And a lot of this is about how do we, how do we promote human flourishing? How do we help people become who they aspire to be? So that's the mission of the Personal Robots group, and that's the lens upon which a lot of this work, this first part of the talk, I'm going to touch upon. So we're in the age now, or this era of generative AI. I can tell you, as a roboticist, we are extremely practical. All of these cool new tools and technologies, obviously before generative AI, it was deep learning was the latest hype cycle, various hype cycles before that. We basically just view these as cool tools in a toolbox that we actually have to leverage to design and create solutions, many of these techniques, many of these methods with human-centered design to get a robot to do anything interesting or useful for people, right? So we very basically view each of these new kinds of tools and technologies as just another thing we can leverage to help us advance our mission faster, more flexibly, more robustly, et cetera. So I will say, we have been on this kind of trajectory, certainly since I think Siri, came out on the iPhone, where now a dominant mode in which everyday people interact with artificial intelligence is as a personified entity. Now, before that, a lot of that was decision support tools, graphs, whatever, like more like a tool that you would use to make decisions. The interfaces are becoming more and more social and interpersonal, right? So there's a long tradition, of course, of AI for graphical agents, virtual characters. If we mentioned Siri, then Alexa came along, and now you had far field speech, right? And the whole question was, are people actually going to talk to AI? And it turned out this idea of kind of AI that could be evoked just with a wake word suddenly allowed people of all ages, from young children to older adults, to access AI in a much more easy way. So that was kind of another big jump ahead. And now, of course, we're in this era of generative AI with ChatGPT. And now ironically, we're back to text on screen and typing, but the language and the multi-turn interaction, is now much more advanced, flexible, and robust with these generative methods than they had been done previously. And now we're seeing even more so. People are very willing to have long, intimate conversations with AI. So just to say, we as human beings are so willing to engage AIs in this social and emotional way. And I have seen this from my own work for decades, but now with kind of the proliferation of this kind of personified AI technologies, I think now everybody appreciates this is a dominant mode upon which everyday people interact with AIs. And there are important implications of that. So first of all, when you look at human behavior and intelligence, it's just important to acknowledge that we have evolved. We have very specialized regions in our brain to understand and interact with the social world. Now, what do I mean by the social world? We have the inanimate world where objects are governed by the laws of physics, and we have parts of our brain that are good at understanding those kinds of entities. And then there are social others. And social others' behavior is governed by having a mind. So mental states, things like thoughts, beliefs, intents, desires, inferring them and understanding them, having your own and being able to infer and recognize that in others in order to understand and coordinate behavior is like, we are like the super species of that on the planet. If you look at everything around us, everything we've built, it's all because we can communicate and collaborate in these extremely sophisticated ways with one another. This is an incredible competence that we have. And I can tell you it is very difficult to endow machines with this kind of capability. But a list of these things are kind of here, right? So how do you, kind of have a theory of other minds? Again, inferring these mental states. How do you empathize with other? Can you connect, communicate, harmonize? All of these things are about social intelligence. And so again, an opportunity and challenge that my group has looked at for decades is, what does that mean when you talk about a machine that can collaborate with us in a much more human-centered, natural way? So a lot of my work has looked at, again, advancing the social and emotional intelligence of AI systems. So, and particularly around emotional engagement, how do you design to be a more richly collaborative ally, real bidirectional give and take? And thinking about long-term interaction, when you look at Star Wars and you think about robots, it's not like it's a device that you kind of turn on and turn off and like walk away from it, but robots kind of like they live with you. Like they are part of your world. They are beyond the screen. And there are different challenges and opportunities in designing something that is of our world, in our world, shares our world, and over long periods of time where it goes beyond just session to session interaction to this idea of building a relationship. And you're starting to see the beginnings of people's willingness to build a relationship with AIs. And so then what are the appropriate roles between people and increasingly intelligent machines? So when we think about kind of the foundational building blocks of these capabilities, the field of social robotics, increasingly, I would say even fields like natural language processing is broadening out to think about social intelligence questions. But how do you recognize, again, all the richness and sophistication and subtlety of human communication? Again, we're talking about ChatGPT, which is largely text and language still. They're just starting to release multimodal capabilities. But if you look at the kind of more human-sided literature, I mean, people will say human communication is anywhere from 60 to 80% nonverbal. Nonverbal. There is a lot of richness in how we communicate that goes beyond the words that we speak. And in fact, if given a person an option between believing what a person says via their words versus how they say it, with their prosody of their body, they tend to believe how you say it as your true meaning and your true, kind of intention. So nonverbal communication is huge. It's still a largely kind of uncracked nut, I would say, in AI, but this is where things are starting to try to go more. Not just on one-to-one individual interaction, but to a group, right? We can collaborate with groups of people as well. So again, lots of room to grow in the perception of human social cues. And that's kind of giving you a sense of where the new challenges are. You've heard a lot about machine learning. I'm sure you heard a lot about supervised machine learning with these large data sets that you label and you feed in to recognize and classify and predict sorts of categories and classes and patterns. There's reinforcement learning. You're going to see some examples of that in my talk, where a system actually learns through its own firsthand experience. You're hearing about generative AI, which is kind of a combination. It's kind of an unsupervised learning approach that combines aspects of reinforcement learning and deep, supervised big neural networks and so forth. It's kind of a mashup. But the point is, when you look at social emotional learning, it's not a one-directional stream. It's often a collaboration between the teacher versus the learner. And often we think about the machine as being the learner and the human being the instructor, whether it's through data or interaction or whatever. But the reality is, in human interaction, it's very fluid. We can learn and collaborate from each other as peers, et cetera, et cetera. So when you think about this interaction of teaching and learning, especially for a robot, which is now something facing you and is having to learn from your real-time interaction, how do you view that as a collaboration? So there's a lot of interesting work in social forms of learning that is informing that work and beyond. So again, how do you interact with and teach with something that is physically there, learning from you in the moment to do something that's customized, personalized, context relevant? That's a different kind of learning problem than just feeding a bunch of data and trying to, learn classifiers and so forth. When we talked about a system that can coordinate with you, it's not only important that the robot be able to understand your social cues, but you have to understand and infer its states of mind, right? And so how the robot expresses, both verbally and non-verbally, is actually quite important, because as human beings, we are trying to read both signals all the time, whether you meant to design something for that or not. So the point is, we are inferring all kinds of things from a robot's behavior. So you really have to think holistically about how is it expressing itself to the person, so that they have appropriate mental models of what the robot is actually kind of cognitively processing, right? So that expression becomes really important. And then in the big picture, now what happens when you're in this interaction, this collaboration? Well, now you're in the realm of human social psychology and social perception. And again, people can't turn this off. They will ascribe these things to the nature of the interaction, even with the machine. So when you're in collaboration, things like building rapport, building trust and trustworthiness, a sense of liking, all of these things come into play when you start talking about real kind of interaction, even with an AI system. And so how do you design robots that can do that over repeated encountered over long-term interaction? So again, this is just kind of giving you a sense of the broad kind of field of play and advancements we're trying to make in the big picture. Okay, so given all of that, again, I kind of teed up what our group is kind of our vision of how can we design these technologies to help people to succeed, grow, and flourish. A lot of our work is inspired by positive psychology. This is a diagram from Martin Seligman. And it's just to say, when you talk about human flourishing, these are the kinds of qualities you have to address. And these are profoundly social and emotional. They're not just cognitive decision-making processes, which has dominated kind of the conversation around AI, right? So it's about engagement, relationships, well-being, meaning, positive emotion, a sense of achievement, right? That is not the words we typically talk about when we talk about AI systems. We're typically talking about efficiency and saving money and making money. These are the things that we need to address to promote human flourishing. So again, it's just to say this is a different lens upon which we look at our work and why we build the systems we do. So again, in the big picture, then, this humanized engagement is not just about having a really good, experience with the AI technology, say it's a robot. But if you can achieve this deeper human engagement, you can actually enable transformative change in people's lives. So what do I mean by transformative change? Well, if somebody can actually learn new skills or mindsets or capabilities, they are transformed. They are able to do things they couldn't before. They now have access to opportunities they didn't have before. That's an example for me of transformative change. In healthcare, if you're better able to manage a chronic condition, if you're better able to be emotionally resilient in times of stress, you are transformed, and you are going to be able to do things you were not going to be able to do before. You are transformed. So these are the kinds of things that we try to look at in our group as case studies and as context to try to demonstrate and advance our work with actual people in real world situations. So we do a lot of work across different domains. I'm going to focus on our particular work on education. And so in this section, I'm going to talk about our personalized learning companion work. A lot of that work is actually focused on early childhood education. So young children, kindergarten type age, often in school settings. So why does this matter? So in the United States, we do not have a universal early childhood education system. We're trying to change that, but historically we have not had one. And because of that, there's a lot of inequity in children's readiness, even in kindergarten. And there's a lot of data and studies that have shown if children cannot even start kindergarten ready to learn, it is very difficult to catch up. And there's a lot of down the road consequences of that. It can be extremely expensive to try to catch children up. So just to say, in the United States, there is a big societal need to improve equity in the quality of early childhood education. So it's a serious challenge. It's a serious problem that we face here in the United States, but I'm sure worldwide, post-pandemic, we're all seeing the impacts of this on children's education of all grades. So just to say, this question of how we can create technologies that help to enhance, help children learn in ways that allow them to be at grade appropriate level right now is of particular importance, because there's a lot of kids that are not where they would have been if we didn't have the pandemic. So anyway, there's just a lot of societal need, global societal need, which I think is why, again, this idea of AI tutors has been around for decades. It's been around a long time, right? And with every new technology, we try to advance them. This is just the context upon which I think we are really seeing the next wave of why having these personalized learning technologies are important for kids today, beyond all of the other kind of traditional reasons, right? So when we talk about AI supported learning now, we're talking about physically embodied, socially embodied robots. Now, what are the advantages of that? We just heard about Conmigo, and Bill was talking about this concern of social isolation between students to other students, students to teachers. That is a real risk. A lot of these systems are really designed like Cognigo for one-to-one text-based interaction between a student and the screen, right? What we're trying to do is create learning companion technologies that are integrated into the human social environment of learning. Learning is profoundly social. That is one thing we have definitely learned from all of our great educational technologies. Learning is profoundly social. It's important that people learn in the context of other people and human teachers. So that is, kind of table stakes for what we're trying to design. So in this photo here, you see a social robot that, because it's physically embodied, it can actually interact with a group of people. It can interact with the main child learner. It can turn and talk to the teacher. There's a little girlfriend looking like, imagine that fluid interaction in a socially situated environment like a classroom. That is what we're trying to do. The robot then is designed to try to help facilitate this interaction to promote, obviously, the children's learning. A lot of our context is around early language and literacy skills, because we know that's critical for a lot of future academic success. It is designed not to be a tutor, but to be a practice partner. That's what we call the learning companion. It's like a really fun playmate that plays games, educational learning games with kids, that reinforces and gives them additional practice to what the teacher is actually teaching. So we're not trying to compete with the teacher, we're trying to supplement what the teacher does. And again, why did we choose early childhood beyond the societal challenge? It is a real litmus test, because young children aren't going to learn by typing text and so forth. Like, they interact through play and real-time social emotional interaction. If you can design a technology that can actually engage a young child in an authentic way, your algorithms are doing something right, right? So it is a really like acid test, I would say, as if our algorithms and our advancements are actually doing something meaningful and advancing the ball, so to speak. We are modeling peer-to-peer interactions, right? So the robot interacts more like a peer-like, maybe slightly more advanced learner than, again, a human teacher. And we do a lot of personalization under the hood. So we use a lot of reinforcement learning to do that. I'm sure we've heard about generative AI and how you can customize prompts. A lot of our work is about the robot through real-time interaction, through how the child expresses what they say, what they do in the game. Robot is trying to learn what we call a policy of what the most optimal next action is to help achieve the goals of keeping that child engaged and promoting that child's learning. So that's reinforcement learning. We do a lot of reinforcement learning in this. We don't just do this in a vacuum. We engage teachers and students and stakeholders in co-design. And this is really, really important, because whatever we design has to fit in, again, in the human environment. If it's not solving a problem that the teachers or the students are really wanting, they're not going to use it, right? And we've seen that story in technology again and again. So we do a lot of co-design. We are innovating at this intersection of psychology and engagement, so understanding, real people, what they do in this context, and with a technology like a social robot. We do a lot of human experience design to make sure that these games and these interactions are not only, effective, but delightful and engaging, emotionally, socially engaging for children. And that is what is defining and informing what are the computational challenges we're trying to design, right? We don't just say we want to design a new kind of machine learning algorithm. We ask the question, what do people need? What does it have to be able to do? What advancements are required? And that is how we frame the technical challenges of the algorithms we try to innovate. When you think about personalization, AI-enabled personalization, in some sense, that becomes part of the design cycle as well, because whatever we design is going to be adapted based on this real-time interaction with learners. And then again, that is a constant monitoring and redesigning with the stakeholders as well. So this is kind of just to say co-design with AI in this context is part of the process we have to go through. There's really no cutting corners here, right? There's no just throwing in data and get something out. It's like, it is a constant process of trying to keep yourself honest and making sure you're delivering something of value that is working in the authentic context. And we learn a lot through this process, and we are able to make really compelling advances to AI when we do this process. So I'm going to show a series of videos just so that you can kind of see a little bit of this in action. So again, we're talking about peer-to-peer learning. So how do we model a robot? How do we create these models that a robot can actually engage in this kind of interaction? So one of the first steps that we did, and this was a few years ago, was we brought in a lot of kids and we recorded how they engage in a story sharing interaction, because a lot of what we have the robot do with the child is a dialogic story sharing kind of interaction. So we record these things, we then start to train new models based on the capability, and then we basically put a robot in the context of one of these children and compare what does that behavior look like when now it's a child interacting with a robot versus a child interacting with another child. How close are we to capturing kind of that dynamic?
So the cat broke the window and then it ran through school and peeked inside. He saw they saw and then they saw cat saw classmates.
So a lot of effective computing. Again, this is other kinds of machine learning models to track states and sequences of interaction patterns.
And they wanted to go in.
And then we put the model in the robot and we bring in, and again, a whole other group of children are now engaging in this interaction and looking at the social cues of the robot, looking at the child's nonverbal and verbal behavior to try to have it engage as kind of an interested, supportive learning companion. So that gives you a sense of kind of like how we endow kind of these social skills into the robot. This next video is kind of the bigger picture of starting to try to learn policies, adaptive policies to personalize interactions with children. So again, reinforcement learning, a different kind of machine learning to learn, again, personalized policies.
Hi, my name is Tega. Nice to meet you. What is your name?
Aliana.
Early literacy skills form the basis of a large part of children's future learning. But children entering preschool and kindergarten come from linguistically diverse backgrounds, affected by many factors, including their family's cultural origin and socioeconomic status. Therefore, it's important to create personalized solutions for promoting early literacy.
What was your favorite story so far?
My favorite story, it was the bunny one.
Using a social robot as an embodied AI agent provides several advantages. Studies show that early literacy development requires exposure to a rich variety of spoken language and vocabulary during social interaction with others. Children engage with social robots in an emotive and relational way, and the affective cues that social robots can elicit from children provide a better opportunity to assess their engagement states. Our reinforcement learning personalization policy takes full advantage of these engagement cues. The robot's goal is to learn an action policy that maximizes the chance for each child to learn new linguistic knowledge while also promoting engagement. During the robot's storytelling, the robot models the child's listening behavior based on several features, including whether the child responds to the robot's question.
What would you see if you went to a rainforest someday?
Lions.
The length of the response, and also the child's facial affect cues during the robot's story. The robot's action space is the lexical and syntactic complexity of a sentence in the storybook. The reward function is a weighted sum of engagement and learning.
The frog went out of his pond.
The reward function was designed to reward new lexical and syntactic learning, but balancing this with engagement so that the algorithm doesn't always select a story with the highest linguistic complexity. Over the course of 3 months, we studied 67 bilingual and English language learning students from 12 local kindergarten classrooms. Students were divided into 3 balanced groups. The personalized and non-personalized groups interacted with our social robot Tega in a fully autonomous interaction in which the robot and child took turns telling stories. The robot either personalized its story choice or selected from a fixed curriculum. Children in the baseline group only participated in pre- and post-tests, without robot interaction. We found that the story selection policy did personalize to each child over time, shown by the root mean square distance from the initial policy and the rate of matching maximum reward state action pairs in the Q table between 2 policies. Children who interacted with a personalized robot learned and used significantly more target words compared to the non-personalized and baseline groups. We also found that children's engagement cues are significantly correlated, and that this trend was driven by the personalization condition.
At the crest of the hill stood a bear blinking blearily outside his cave.
They went to the crest of the hill and found a bear standing. And he saw a bear and he was really scared, so...
Children in the personalized condition attempted to answer the robot's questions more often, and this tendency was also reflected in their affective arousal cues. Analyzing children's electrodermal activity and body pose revealed that children in the personalized condition showed significantly higher attention and engagement levels throughout the sessions. With a relatable social robot companion, we have demonstrated that when we match young students with a learning partner that can grow and engage with them, those students flourish.
Okay, so punchline is the personalized robots seem to be even more engaging and able to help support children learning than the non-personalized robot. But I can tell you, even both of those robots gave children's gain over baseline just classroom instruction. So even just having the presence of a robot to help practice and reinforce these kinds of behaviors was beneficial to children. So this was a result that was shown on the slide. Some other things that we've looked at is what about the quality of relationship that children experience with the robot, and how does that affect their learning? So we know that when children have a better relationship with their teachers, often correlated with higher learning outcomes. We are starting to see that also with these AI systems. So we looked at measures of measuring interpersonal relationship that in human-human interactions, we adapted that to a human-robot context. We are seeing the same kinds of trends. So children who report having a closer relationship to the robot tends to be correlated with higher learning gains. And when we add in personalization, that correlation is even stronger. So we're starting to see these interactions between personalization, relationship, and learning. We mentioned that you saw the video of the benefits of the practice partner. We have also been bringing these technologies into home settings to try to foster parent-child robot triadic interactions to enrich the dialogue between parents and children. So again, bringing the social interaction beyond the classroom to the home. And so the punchline here is there's a lot of assumption that a human-human relationship is what we should be going for. And this work is showing it's not necessarily the case. It really just depends. So one of the things that's so appealing and interesting about the social robot we've designed is, yes, there are absolutely attributes of a human motivating supportive ally, learning with a friend, right? It's also a cool high-tech tool that can access all kinds of information and so forth from the internet, et cetera, et cetera. But there are these qualities, as I'm sure you saw in these videos, of this non-judgmental, attentive, almost like companion animal. And that creates a safe context for learning, whereas a child might be embarrassed to make a mistake in front of a friend or a teacher. They don't seem to feel that way in front of a social robot. So they're able to try new things, take safe learning risks, which of course benefits their learning. So again, there's a different kind of relationship that's possible where they can have actual different kinds of benefits that enhance and supplement the peer-to-peer learning and the teacher-student learning that we have in our educational system. So I've talked a lot about reinforcement learning. You're like, what about generative AI? So yes, of course, we're bringing generative AI into our systems as well. You can see we do a lot of dialogic storytelling. The generative AI models are allowing us to be much more flexible and expansive in the kinds of conversations and questions asked and answered that the robot is capable of engaging children in. We were much more limited and kind of constrained before generative AI. So I'm just going to show one more video of this example of now having a dialogue around one of the stories in the library of storybooks that's in our educational intervention.
What was her doll made out of?
So there's a story here.
I'm not sure. I think I remember something with beads. Can you tell me the rest?
You're right about the beads. They are part of the doll's
So giving
decoration.
hints,
But let's focus on what the whole doll is made from.
being able to adjust the story.
It's a type of soft material that comes from an animal. Can you guess which one?
So again, this is a generated hint. This is pretty good.
It says buckskin, but what animal does that come from?
Buckskin comes from a deer, which is a kind of animal that lives in the forest. The doll was made from the soft skin of a deer. Let's start with the first pick. Can you tell me what he built his house out of?
I think it's made out of cakes.
That sounds delicious. Unfortunately, I don't think that's right. The first pig built his house out of straw.
What would you use to build your house?
That's an interesting question.
Taking a mixed
I think I'd build my house out of solar panels so that I can power my home with renewable energy.
And he's like, renewable
Wow,
energy,
that's
that's a
very
great
smart.
answer.
Thank you.
So again, just much more flexible, responsive, open-ended, bi-directional interactions that's powered by generative AI. So obviously this is allowing us to kind of approach this, using new tools and technologies that we didn't have access beforehand. And Jen, just before I kind of leave this section, just to, acknowledge that education underlies a lot of real-world applications across a lot of different disciplines. So when you talk about health literacy, financial literacy, coaching and training, behavior change for health, at kind of the crux of a lot of these interventions is helping people develop new skills, new mindsets, and new knowledge so they can affect positive change for themselves, make better decisions, right? So again, learning is so foundational to a lot of these other domains where these agents could have potentially a lot of use. All right, so I'm gonna kind of end this section on learning with AI in this social, emotional, human context. And now talk about how do we help people become more AI literate or even AI fluent so that we are empowered to create solutions to address challenges in our communities, right? So, there's been a lot of fear and concern about AI replacing people in jobs, changing, the landscape of the job market, et cetera, et cetera. That is absolutely going to happen to some extent, but Eric Brynjolfsson at Stanford makes this point that way more value is going to be unlocked when AI is designed to help people create something fundamentally new. So he is basically speaking to this deeper collaboration, creative collaboration between people and AI. And this is what we really need to focus on, is the creative collaborative interaction of people with these new empowering technologies. And so basically, the argument is AI is not going to replace people for those jobs. It's people who know how to harness AI are going to be the ones who get those jobs over people who don't know how to use these technologies, right? So there's a lot of reason when we think about the workforce as it is today and how it's going to continue, and helping people develop these skills and abilities so they can be competitive and effective and creative problem solvers in the workforce. So we created this initiative RAISE a couple years ago. RAISE again stands for Responsible AI for Social Empowerment and Education. And the mission is to advance equity in learning, education, and empowerment through artificial intelligence by rethinking and innovating how to holistically and equitably prepare diverse students from K-12 to workforce in these technologies so that we can be happy, engaged, empowered, successful, in an increasingly AI-powered society. So that is our mission for RAISE. And now I'm going to talk about a number of the programs that we've been developing and innovating to deliver on this mission. So another way to say that mission statement might be we're trying to advance an empowered and wise human with AI world by, with, and for all, right? We want everyone to participate and be engaged in this mission. So there are kind of three kind of main buckets that we try to address in all of our curriculum materials, professional development materials, you name it. One is to demystify how AI actually works. There's a lot of confusion and hype out there. We want people to have a practical working knowledge, grade appropriate knowledge of how AI actually works and how to design and use it responsibly. We want people to become informed AI digital citizens so that we have a voice in how we want these technologies integrated and used in society. We've heard many stories of potential bias and inequities that has been arisen because of AI. People need to understand this and have a voice in how they're used. And the third bucket is this self-efficacy and empowerment of being creative makers and problem solvers with these technologies and making that much more inclusive and much greater access to that as well. So a lot of our philosophy here at MIT is, goes all the way back to Seymour Papert. You know, he is kind of the founding father of constructionist learning. He himself studied with Piaget on constructionism. So structivism. So anyway, so Piaget is constructionism, where, you know, basically it's this idea that when you actually make something, learn to make something, create something, share it with others, you are engaging in a much deeper sense of knowledge and empowerment than just kind of absorbing kind of in this lecture style information, right? So the act of creating something meaningful, integrating what you learn in order to do that is really what we're going to need to empower kind of this, you know, a future of children who are going to be creative problem solvers, creator makers, who can, again, you know, make the world a better place with these kinds of technologies. I think the thing that's really exciting now is before it was kind of like, yeah, they're going to get to do that after college. But the reality is these tools and technologies have gotten to the point that they're so accessible that kids can actually start to do this right now, right? So I love this notion of kid power with AI, because kids have this sense of their inner superhero, right? And what if their superpower was AI? And what if they could combine those things and go out and like affect positive change in their communities and even the world based on what they're learning and doing? I think a lot of young people today are feeling a sense of hopelessness because they feel like they can't do anything. AI and all this stuff is happening to them. We want to flip that dialogue so they understand you can create positive change right now with these technologies, and we're going to help them to do that. So we are invading new curriculum, new pedagogical methods. We have this framing we call computational action. So not just learning through making, but learning by solving, learning through this action of children can actually create things with these innovative tools, taking things like MIT App Inventor, which allow kids to make working mobile apps on iOS and Android. We've been infusing App Inventor with state-of-the-art AI tools, generative AI tools, deep learning tools, so they can apply them to make solutions that can affect their community. And how do they do that responsibly? How do they do that ethically? How do they do that with their community? That is what we're trying to help teach kids what to do, how to do that. I'm going to give a quick example with App Inventor. So I'm sure many of you are aware of App Inventor, but this is like one of the key flagship platforms at MIT. It is open source. A lot of everything we do basically in Raise is open source. People are free to use these materials, adapt them, et cetera, et cetera. Again, allows anyone to create mobile apps in Android or iOS, this easy, intuitive block-based coding interface. So lowers the barrier to entry of, you know, students being able to code things with these kind of, again, block-based coding environments. There's over 18 million users who've in over 195 countries who use App Inventor. Almost 50% are from developing economies. So again, widespread usage. I'm going to highlight one example of computational action that's particularly inspiring. So we collaborate with a nonprofit called Technovation. Technovation is a STEM program for girls, particularly like high school age girls, around computational thinking and innovation. So this is one of the teams that participated in Technovation, and they're girls who are living in one of the largest slums in India. And they decided that they wanted to create an app that basically helped to schedule time at when they would go, the community could go to the kind of watering community area to gather water. Now, who tends to go to gather water for the family? It tends to be girls about this age. It could take hours to do this. There could be fights that would break out because of a lot of tension. So they wanted to create this app to help it be faster, easier, and a better experience for everyone who went to this community watering areas, right? So again, something that actually really empowered their community with middle school age girls. So again, anyone can create solutions with these tools and technologies. We have been creating a lot of curriculum, professional development programs for educators and teachers to bring these kinds of tools, technologies, insights, and concepts, mindsets, and skill sets to students. So one of our flagship programs is called Day of AI. Day of AI is short format curriculum for any teacher to teach for all students, because it's not just for computer science students anymore, right? The AI genie's out of the bottle. Day of AI is really about the intersection of AI, digital citizenship, and empowerment. So it is truly for all students. We have curriculum literally from kindergarten to 12th grade, including 12th grade kind of computer science curriculum. It's short format. We know teachers are overwhelmed. So instead of asking them to commit to a whole semester long curriculum, these are like short 4 to 6 hour curriculum that we're finding a lot of teachers are like, that I can try out. It introduces AI literacy in the way I talked about, and in the way that it's multidisciplinary, highly student relatable context, hands-on learning and making, creating, lots of critical decision making, critical thinking, creative decision making, et cetera, that we know is important. It's free and open for the materials, and we have a lot of online free asynchronous professional development. This is an example of a lot of the topics that we've been creating over time, expanding that. This year, we just released one in data science and climate. This year, we might do one on space. We're seeing a lot of launches to the moon and so forth. So we think about and look at how AI is shaping kind of topics that are really interesting in the moment to students, and how can we create materials to do that. Last year, it was all about ChatGPT. We created that curriculum last year. It was the most downloaded curriculum of all of them. So we try to be super agile and responsive. I'm going to show you a video of what kids do once they've been exposed to these kinds of materials. So this was the AI and data science curriculum.
My name is Liliana Fournier.
My name is Jessie McGinney.
My name is Victoria Leith, and my project is Tree Saver.
And we were basically getting information about deforestation in Massachusetts, and we use that information to make an app
where people can click it, and ChatGPT will give them information on how they can help save trees and help their community.
We found that it was really important because it's such a stable part to human life. Sort of in the backyard of our school, we're filled by trees. Trees are everywhere. And then not even 30 minutes out in Boston, there's really no trees at all. So sort of that duality and like that drastic change was really interesting and intrigued all of us.
The future is kind of scary to think about because with the way the climate is changing and all that's happening, I feel like if there's no change done fast, I feel like the future would not be a good one.
The whole point of our project is to help people find ways to help their community and help the environment by improving the amount of trees that are cut down. AI can make us a more powerful person because it can help us find ways to connect with others and help us connect and gain more information that we couldn't get ourselves.
It could still be mastered because it's so new, and I feel like getting that in schools everywhere, you could really find like the new greatest minds that will be able to use AI for the better of the world.
And yes, we did. I felt powerful, like I can do this, and I feel like I can make an app now that can change the world.
So this is what we're after. I can tell you this Day of AI program, we're already, all over the world, over 110 countries, over 10,000 educators, K-12 teachers are bringing Day of AI to their classroom and growing through our international partnerships. We have other partners who are bringing it to other regions of the world, like South America, Latin America. So again, this is very much a community-oriented endeavor. So, what do kids solve with AI? I mean, we see this again and again. They want to create a more just society, right? They want to, help our planet to thrive. They want to help people to flourish. I mean, the kids are truly inspiring, as you could see in that video. So I'm just kind of wrap up with some resources that I can point you to. We have a lot of different curriculum on RAISE. You can check it out. The Day of AI, daveai.org, has all those curriculum I mentioned, teacher professional development materials. We have other programs in data activism, so data science for social good. Future Makers is a technical skills building program. All these programs are available. We know that AI has to support teachers in supporting students. All of our curriculum professional development is also oriented to help teachers feel informed and comfortable in teaching their kids about AI. We have written a position paper. I'm going to leave the screen up just for a little bit for those of you who want to get the QR code on generative AI and K-12 education. It gives a lot of opportunities, challenges, et cetera, that might be of interest to you. We know that teachers need to also be up to speed on how they can use generative AI in their practice. This is a free online course we developed with Grow with Google. It's a 2-hour go at your own pace, all about how you can use generative AI in your teaching practice. As Bill mentioned, things like customizing lessons, creating rubrics, et cetera, like these are actual activities that you go through as part of the course to be a very practical hands-on thing for how generative AI can be used to empower teachers. Teachers are an important AI workforce for this country. So you can check that out. Teachers and educators need to be part of the conversation. We just released AI policy guidance. Thank you, Bill, for helping preview earlier versions of this paper, but it's available now. So when you think about AI policy, this is for K-12, but again, I think this is going to be relevant for other age groups as well. But hopefully this will be informative and interesting for you also. So around AI policy guidance. All right, and you're all here joining the call because you're interested in this stuff. It's still early days, so you're the pioneers. You should experiment and share, and I know Jibo helps to facilitate that. So looking forward to see what you are innovating and sharing as well. And with that, thank you.
Cynthia, thank you so much. Amazing information, knowledge, and I think to absorb. As you were speaking, I was getting messages from teachers locally and globally about how do I get involved? And I think you really shared so many incredible actionable resources, which is what makes, I think, the work you're doing so fantastic. To take it from the lab to give educators a way to implement this. You talked a little bit about this, and as I asked this question, I mentioned in the chat, please, folks can put questions in the chat so in the time we have left, you are able to ask. We can get a few questions from you all in too. But how are these folks in emerging economies and globally finding these resources? So often when we talk even to some of our members, they'll say, we just feel like we're behind because our young children don't have the same access to just core technology that kids have in the US that they might have in Europe. And I think you've developed tools that these young people can access. But how are people finding them? How do you see folks overcoming in some of these markets the connectivity issues or their mindset that they don't have the type of resources that they need?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I mean, at least from what we're doing in Raise, so one of the advantages of being MIT is we are a place that people tend to just Google and kind of find what is MIT doing in this space, and they do tend to find MIT Raise or Dave AI from that search. We are more with the Dave AI program in particular. That's because I feel it's like it is for all students and all teachers. It's designed for that. It is like the entry level point, right? Where it's like if you're just curious and you want to try to see what it's about and you're not able to take a semester long curriculum, because there's a lot of curriculum that are being developed out there right now, but it's mostly for like computer science teachers. Yeah. This is positioned very differently. This is really AI and digital citizenship. And we've designed it with access in mind. So we have materials that span the whole gamut from, if you want to be coding apps through App Inventor and things like that, you can do that. We have curriculum that doesn't involve technology at all. So for instance, when the White House, last year released their blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, we created a whole curriculum in AI and human rights and policy that kids to debate. Doesn't require any technology whatsoever. So we have tried to create materials that no matter, how technologically comfortable teachers are or resource they are, there is something there that they should be able to access and bring to their students. We are now working more systematically and strategically with organizations around the world. These are usually like ministries of education increasingly or nonprofits where they want to take, and I call them Dave had like reference materials and then localize them so that they're relevant to their local region and adapt them for that context. And then they help recruit and train teachers. So again, it's becoming a very network community oriented approach where we've kind of done the kind of reference design, but then it's open, right? It's open Creative Commons. It's the expectation that people will take them and adapt them to be relevant and on point for their students. And so we're starting to see that happen as well. So for instance, we have a particular foundation that we've been collaborating with in Chile. If you go to the Dave A website, they have been bringing it to many, many different countries in Latin and South America. So we often rely again on our kind of local collaborators to help get that scale. So, there are materials out there, and I know we've done research around the Day of AI materials. There's a whole evaluation study if you go to the Day of AI website with teachers from 40 countries. We're being successful, I think, in teachers' ability to take these materials and adapt them to their context and feel that they're having a good experience, both for themselves as teachers and for their students. So I would definitely encourage people to check those out. We have recommended grade bands, but I can tell you this material, I think it's also super relevant for post-secondary. If you're really talking about kind of what the heck is AI and, what's the responsible use and, how do I think about the ethical implications of that's what this curriculum is. You can age up the dialogue and the projects or down accordingly. We just kind of have recommended grade bands, but I think this is so foundational. It's actually, again, just a good foundations course for all kinds of people. So I would definitely point people there first and foremost. And it is different, I think, because most other curriculum that I know of has largely been designed, again, for computer science oriented instructors. So anyway, this is different. This is really AIs for everyone.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. We have our first question in the chat that I'm gonna from Marta Amaric, and she is at the eHealth Center at our Open University of Catalonia, so one of our JWEL members. And there's the age-old, there's a lot of resistance for many teachers in introducing AI in education. And I was even thinking about this, kind of these building blocks that they're learning by doing, not by the lecture, which is also such a traditional mode in so many parts of the world. How do you actively try and get people past those mindset biases?
Yeah, so we're in a couple intriguingly interesting conversations with ministries of education. I think we're just at a time now where the world acknowledges it's just really important to build a foundational AI literacy, if not AI fluency in general. So you're always going to have your early movers, your innovators, and that's kind of who's coming to us right now, understandably. I think we're starting to move into this next phase where ministries of education are like, no, this is actually important, and we need to figure out how to get it in systematically into the formal education system in a way that makes sense, given that teachers already have to teach a lot of other stuff, but to make room for that. So so part of this is we have to incentivize teachers through the mechanisms that kind of allow them to advocate or convince whoever they need to that they can do. So whether that's professional development credits that they need to do anyway, right? Or advocate for, to the principal or to the administrators of the school that this is important, right? Or if in different parts of the world, again, if ministries of education also help to signal, this is actually really important and is important that you teach it. I think we're trying to create the conditions upon which teachers feel they are able to actually set the time aside to actually do this. And we're trying to be very mindful of the amount of time we're asking of teachers to do this. So again, that's why we're starting with short format, but just we're trying to do both the top down and bottom up, and we're running some experiments in different parts of the world right now to see what that looks like. But I'm just sharing kind of in general, there seems to be acknowledgement at the top level. This is important. And growing grassroots and quality materials, that people can look at and go, oh, people are having a good experience, I should try that. And it's not a super heavy lift. That's how we're trying to help kind of, bring those two ends of the spectrum together. The other thing that I think is just worth people knowing is an exercise that we're actively involved in is because we have, again, a wide range of curriculum, we're actually starting to think about sub-packaged subject relevant curriculum. So like if you're a math teacher or a science teacher or an arts teacher or a social studies teacher or an English or language arts teacher, what might be a short format AI literacy curriculum that both matches to what you have to teach anyway, but then also helps you learn about AI, right? So we're in that exercise right now as another kind of tactic to try to help teachers bring AI education into their classrooms. So we're trying to figure out how how to make all of these incentives align. But I think the broader ecosystem is also starting to align around this as well.
Yeah. I think that's for the teachers on this call and the educators who might feel like they're those early adopters. I imagine it's encouraging to hear that the ministries are seeing this, right? There are people that they might not get to hear from and talk to, but you are seeing this kind of at least at either end of the spectrum, and it'll come together, which is I think important and exciting. One last question, also from a member, Melchor Sanchez, who's with UNAM in Mexico. And he's interested just in your thoughts and comments on the challenges of like excessively anthropomorphizing the, different personal characteristics with when you use these Gen AI tools. What you're seeing and how what you're seeing, you're able to combat people's concerns or respond to and ameliorate their concerns would be interesting to understand.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say this is very much why we started to go deep into AI literacy, was exactly this point. So, we are designing, these personified AI technologies, have done it for decades to try to help promote human flourishing, right? But we have seen examples now, social media is kind of like the poster child for where a lot of harm is being done through these technologies. And then with ChatGPT, again, it started with Siri and then Alexa, now a ChatGPT. We have seen it for decades, people's willingness to engage socially and emotionally with these AI technologies. Now you're seeing it at scale. And then sometimes, the media will present, again, kind of stories and dialogues where it's like, whoa, like maybe not so healthy, right? So this is why the AI literacy piece is so critical. And I think the big thing people have to understand right now, and I have other slides around this, that the paradox, if I'll call it a paradox, is that the generative AI technologies present themselves as being, very capable in a human-like way through language, right?
Yeah.
But they're not human. The way they think, the way they generate the outputs is not human at all. It's completely different, right? I mean, a lot of these, the large language models are language models. They're trying to predict and generate the next word. So we just have to all understand that when it's generating an output that could be really intriguing and on point and exciting or completely off, the algorithm does not understand what it's generating.
Yes.
All the meaning is ascribed to the human being who is looking at it and making sense of it to say, wow, that was really useful or creative, or what the heck? It's like, oh, completely wrong, right? The AIs do not understand what they're generating. They are generating, and human beings are ascribing the meaning, which is why we have to be critical in the right sense of, is that output valuable, useful to me, or not? Because again, when used responsibly, appropriately, it can help accelerate and it can be, again, terrific.
Yeah.
But it can also be incredibly misleading, right? We see examples of like, it seems so reasonable in its response. And like, if you're an expert and you're like, but that is completely made up, right? So you just have to be a critical thinker when you use these kinds of tools and technology. So the responsible use piece of the AI literacy and understanding what these algorithms are actually doing, so you understand how much you can rely on them and not to over rely on them, is like really important.
Right.
So whether it's the personified aspects or the information, no matter what the aspect, it's just important, I think, that people understand what these algorithms are doing, so that you understand this is how much I can kind of rely on them, right? To do something, right? And I always have to think critically about the output, right?
Great. Well, on that note, I hope everyone can join me in thanking Cynthia very much for an incredibly interesting and informative, packed with good resources and information session. For those of you who are here, Amy has already put in the chat, members, we'll be doing a roundtable discussion next week with Haywan Park, who is a very valuable member of Cynthia's team and lab, to do further discussions. And there's another event on August 22nd coming up. we are for the broader public on emerging AI innovations. We have video recorded this, and so we'll make that video available to the folks who are here and publicly, and we will be sending a survey. So we really would appreciate folks' feedback and input, because this is a give and take. We, and I think that came through loud and clear even from what Cynthia was sharing. We don't do any of our work alone at MIT. We understand that there are local contexts and information and knowledge we can be getting at every stage. So thank you everyone for being here. Looking forward to seeing some of you next week and others later in August. Take care. Bye-bye.